The door handle was colder than it should have been. That was the first thing I noticed when my second life began. Not the date on the notice board, not the exam number printed on the back of my trembling hand, not the fact that I was wearing the same navy blazer I had worn the morning my first life cracked open in front of 300 students. It was the handle of Examination Hall 3, brass worn smooth by generations of frightened palms, icy against my fingers even though the corridor was thick with summer heat. In my first life, I had never touched that handle. I had let Kasia Venn touch it for me. Kasia, the top student, the model candidate, the girl teachers used as proof that discipline could look graceful if it smiled enough. She had stood in front of me at the hall entrance with her clipboard pressed to her chest, pretending to help the seating team organize candidates, and she had guided me past the door, past the front row, past the proctor's table, all the way to the boxed-in desk against the far wall where two girls from her study circle sat on either side of me like soft-faced guards. I had thought it was kindness. She said I looked nervous and needed a quiet corner. I thanked her. I actually thanked the girl who had chosen the blind spot, slid a folded formula strip into my sleeve when she hugged me, blocked my way when I tried to stand, and then raised her hand in the final minute to tell the proctor I had been acting strangely. In my first life, I was searched in front of everyone. The strip fell from my cuff. The hall gasped as if I had stabbed someone. Kasia cried so beautifully that even my own aunt believed her when she whispered that she had tried to protect me from myself. I lost the exam, the scholarship, my place in the academy, and eventually the courage to keep explaining a truth nobody wanted because a perfect villain had arranged me where the cameras could not see her hands. Now I stood with my fingers wrapped around the cold handle, alive again, one breath away from the same hall, and when Kasia's voice floated behind me, bright as a bell and twice as dangerous, I did not move aside. "Leora," she called, sweet enough to rot fruit.
Wait.
"I saved you a better seat." I opened the door myself and stepped inside. The room was longer than I remembered, maybe because in my first life I had spent most of the exam staring at my desk while shame crawled up my throat. Rows of gray tables stretched under white lights, each one tagged with a black number card and a clear plastic sleeve for ID. The proctor's table sat beside the door, exactly where I needed it, with two metal trays for confiscated items, a scanner, a stack of incident forms, and a camera monitor showing 6 angles of the hall. Above the entrance, tilted downward like a patient eye, was Camera 1. In my first life, I had only learned about it during the disciplinary hearing, when the board said regretfully, repeatedly, that my corner seat had fallen between the range of Camera 4 and the side window reflection, leaving no footage clear enough to disprove possession. They spoke about technical limitations, as if the camera had failed by accident. It had not. Kasia knew the hall better than some staff members because her mother chaired the Examination Welfare Committee and her uncle supplied half the academy's security equipment. She knew where to place me. She knew where to stand when she pretended to adjust my collar. She knew how to create a little knot of bodies around me so that when I panicked and tried to leave, everyone would see only me shoving through classmates, frantic, guilty-looking, already doomed. This time, I did not search for my assigned desk. I walked straight to seat D01, the single desk closest to the door, so close the proctor could have reached out and tapped my shoulder without standing. It was not my original seat. My admission slip said H18, the same far wall trap as before. But the emergency seating rule was printed in tiny letters on the back of every candidate notice. Any student with documented mobility anxiety, medical risk, or security concern could request a front access seat before materials were opened, provided the change was logged by a chief proctor. In my first life, I had ignored that line because I thought rules were gates other people locked. In this life, I had arrived with a medical note from the campus clinic, a security concern report filed at dawn, and an expression so calm that the assistant proctor looked more frightened than I did when I handed them over. "I need a door access seat," I said. "Before the exam begins. Please log it with time, camera, and witness." The chief proctor, Mr. Halden, glanced from the note to me, then to Kasia hovering in the aisle behind me with her perfect mouth half open. "Seat D01 is available," he said. "You understand this puts you under direct supervision?" I looked at the camera above his shoulder and smiled. That is exactly why I want it. Kasia recovered quickly because girls like Kasia treated surprise like a wrinkle in a uniform, something to smooth before anyone noticed. She glided to my side, soft perfume cutting through the smell of floor wax and exam paper. "Leora, are you sure?" she murmured, lowering her voice so the proctor would hear concern instead of command. "You hate sitting near doors. You said the noise distracts you. I put so much thought into moving our little group near you, so you would not feel alone." Our little group. The phrase slid into the room like a hook. Two girls behind her, Mina and Sorel, gave me matching sympathetic smiles, the kind of smiles people rehearse in mirrors before they help ruin someone. In my first life, they had been the walls of my cage. Mina sat to my left and coughed every time I tried to raise my hand. Sorel sat behind me and accidentally kicked my chair whenever I shifted. Kasia sat 2 rows ahead, visible enough to look uninvolved, close enough to signal with a ribbon on her pen. I used to think bullies were loud. I learned too late that the worst ones speak in helpful whispers and arrange furniture. I set my admission slip on D01, slid my ID into the plastic sleeve, and placed my palms flat on the desk. I changed seats through the proctor. I said, not whispering, "If you save me another place, thank you, but I am sitting here." The words were simple, but the effect was not. The students nearest us turned. Kasia's eyes flicked to the monitor, then to the camera, then to the little brass bell on the proctor's table that would ring once before sealed papers were distributed. She could still adjust. I could see her calculating. The old plan required me boxed in at H18, hidden by shoulders and panic. D01 ruined the blind spot. But Kasia had never become top student by giving up when one path closed. She smiled brighter. "Then we will sit near you," she said, as if generosity had won. "Mina, take D02.
Sorel, D03.
I will take the seat behind Leora. That way, if she needs help, we are right here." There it was, the box rebuilding itself around a different desk. My heartbeat kicked once, hard enough to hurt because some part of my body still belonged to the girl who had died in the first life. But I had not chosen D01 because it was easy to protect. I had chosen it because there was only one way to box in a girl by the door. You had to do it in front of the door, in front of the proctor, and in front of the camera. Mr. Halden looked up from the seating log when Kasia touched the chair behind mine. "Candidates are to sit according to assignment unless changed by staff," he said. Kasia gave him a wounded little laugh. "Of course. I just thought since Leora has special circumstances, familiar faces might help." "Familiar faces are not an accommodation," he replied, and for one clean second I liked him more than I had liked any adult in that building. But Kasia's mother had trained her daughter well. She produced a folded paper from her clipboard, the same clipboard she had used in my first life, to disguise the formula strip. "I am a student welfare marshal today. Mrs. Venn said I should assist with anxious candidates." The title sounded official. It was not. A welfare marshal could hand out water, direct traffic, and report fainting students. She could not alter seating. I knew that now because I had spent the night before my rebirth reading the examination manual on the Academy internet with the dull hunger of someone studying the shape of the knife that killed her. "Student marshals are not allowed inside the rows after candidate check-in," I said. I did not raise my voice. I did not accuse. I simply turned the rule into air and let everyone breathe it. Kasia's smile held, but something behind it sharpened. Mr. Halden extended his hand. "Your marshal badge, please." Her lashes fluttered. I left it at the registration table. "Then you are a candidate, not a marshal, until verified." He pointed toward the middle rows. "Your assigned seat is F07. The room shifted around us, small whispers rising like insects from grass. Kasia had never been corrected in public. Not really. Teachers softened corrections into praise. Students apologized for standing where she wanted to walk. Parents used her name like an achievement. And yet here she was, holding a useless clipboard beside the girl she had planned to trap, while the chief proctor waited with his hand out. She turned to me, still smiling, and lowered her voice into a thread. "You are making a scene before the most important exam of your life." In the old timeline, that sentence would have folded me. I would have apologized. I would have followed her anywhere just to stop people looking. This time, I looked straight at the camera and answered, "No, I am preventing one." The first bell rang at 8:30, and the sealed paper boxes were carried in by two administrators wearing white gloves. The room straightened. Pens stopped clicking. Water bottles settled. Fear entered politely and took a seat on every shoulder. Kasia moved to F07, but she did not surrender. I felt her attention like a pin pressed between my shoulder blades. D01 gave me a view of the proctor's table, the door, the aisle, and the camera monitor. It also gave everyone else a view of me. That was part of the risk. In my first life, hiddenness had killed me. In this one, visibility would either save me or burn me faster. I placed my permitted items in a neat line. 2 black pens, 1 pencil, 1 eraser, transparent ruler, admission slip, ID. Then I emptied my blazer pockets inside out and laid the fabric flat. The assistant proctor blinked at me. "You do not need to do that yet." "I prefer it," I said. "Please record that my pockets are empty before papers are distributed." She hesitated, then nodded because students under direct supervision often became paperwork, and paperwork made adults careful. The girl at D02 stared at me as if I had lost my mind. Maybe I had. Maybe death does something to shame, strips it of its teeth. When you have already been dragged through a disciplinary hearing where strangers say your name like dirt, you stop fearing ordinary embarrassment. Across the aisle, Kasia lifted her pen and rolled it between her fingers. Once, twice, 3 times. In my first life, that had been the signal. Mina would cough. Sorel would drop something. Kasia would walk past under the excuse of needing tissues, brush my sleeve, plant the strip, and retreat before I understood. But Mina and Sorel were no longer near me. The aisle was clear. The proctor was 3 steps away. So Kasia changed the signal. She let her pen fall. It bounced under her desk, rolled forward, then stopped halfway between F07 and the aisle. She raised her hand with a helpless expression. "Sir." My pen rolled away. The assistant proctor went to retrieve it. Kasia stood at the same moment, too quickly, one hand slipping beneath her cuff. I felt the whole room narrow to a bright point. She was going to improvise. Not at my sleeve this time. My desk. My water bottle. My ruler. Something small enough to land near me and become mine the moment someone noticed. I did not wait for heroics. I raised my hand and said, clearly, "Proctor, candidate F07 has left her seat," while reaching into her sleeve. No one breathed. Kasia froze in a half step, one hand hidden against her wrist, the other lifted in offended disbelief. "What?" Her voice cracked. Not much. Just enough for the front row to hear the girl beneath the polish. Mr. Halden turned. "Candidate F07, remain where you are." Kasia laughed, and it was a beautiful laugh, the kind that used to make teachers smile before hearing the joke. "This is absurd." I dropped my pen. "Both hands visible," he said. The assistant proctor held the fallen pen between 2 fingers. Kasia's eyes flicked to me, and in them I saw the moment she understood that I was not guessing. She drew her right hand out from her sleeve. Empty. A few students shifted, disappointed, as if the show had failed to deliver. Then Mr. Halden said, "Left hand." Kasia's face changed by less than a breath. Her left hand emerged slowly, palm open, nothing in it but a thin red mark across the skin where elastic had pressed too tightly. She had hidden the strip higher, then. Or past it already. My stomach dipped. Had I misread? Had she baited me into making a false accusation in front of everyone? Kasia tilted her head, tears gathering with professional speed. "Leora has been unstable all morning," she whispered, loud enough for the room. "I try to help her. She is accusing me because I would not let her panic alone." The old trap tried to return in a new dress. I felt heads turn toward me, curiosity cooling into suspicion. There it was, Kasia's talent, not cheating, not lying, but changing the question. The question was no longer what had she done. It was what was wrong with me. I placed both hands on the desk, palms up. "Then please check the camera," I said. Camera 1. From 8:29 onward. Mr. Halden looked at the monitor. Kash's tears held in place. "You do not need to waste everyone's time," she said softly. "The exam is about to begin." "Exactly," I said. "So check before it begins." The hall watched Mr. Halden rewind the angle above the door. The screen was small, but not small enough to hide the truth. Kasha standing beside me earlier, hand moving toward my desk. Kasha trying to guide Mina and Sorel into the seats beside me. Kasha at F07, pen drop too precise to be accidental. Kasha rising with her left sleeve tilted inward, thumb pressing something flat against her wrist. It was not proof of planting.
Not yet.
But it was enough to move her from golden girl to incident. The second bell was delayed. That had never happened in my first life. The entire hall sat in a silence, so tense I could hear the old air conditioner clicking behind the ceiling panels. Kasha stood near F07 with Mr. Halden and the assistant proctor beside her, her face pale but still arranged. "You cannot search me based on a jealous accusation," she said. "My mother is on the welfare committee." Mr. Halden did not flinch. "Your mother is not in charge of this room." That sentence landed harder than any slap. Kasha's mouth closed. Two senior invigilators entered through the side door, summoned by radio. One was Ms. Wren, the integrity officer whose face I knew from my first life hearing. Back then, she had been kind in the way people are kind when they think the facts are already settled. She offered tissues while explaining that intention did not matter because possession was enough. She told me appeals were unlikely. She never looked cruel. That made it worse. Now she looked at me, then at Kasha, then at the monitor, and her expression sharpened into work. "Candidate F07, she said, "please step to the inspection mat." "This is humiliating," Kasha whispered. "Yes," Ms. Wren said. "It often is." A ripple went through the hall. Kasha stepped onto the blue mat beside the proctor's table, chin lifted, tears gone now because tears could not outrank procedure. The handheld scanner moved over her blazer, her skirt hem, her sleeves. It beeped at her left wrist.
Once. Twice.
3 times. Kasha laughed too quickly. "It is my bracelet. Jewelry is prohibited," Ms. Wren said. "Remove it." Kasha pushed back her cuff. A thin gold bracelet gleamed there, delicate enough to look innocent, except the charm at its center was not a charm. It was a small oval capsule, the same color as skin tone tape, tucked beneath the chain and pressed flat against her pulse. Ms. Wren opened it with a gloved fingernail. Inside was a strip of translucent paper covered in tiny printed formulas. The hall did not gasp all at once. The sound spread in stages, front row first, then middle, then back, like fire catching paper edge by edge. Kasha's face emptied. For the first time in either life, I saw her without performance. She looked young. Not innocent. Just young enough that the ruin shocked even her. "That is not mine," she said, and because fate enjoys ugly jokes, she used my line from the first life word for word. Ms. Wren did not raise her voice. That was what made the moment terrifying. "Candidate F07, you are under examination integrity review. You will not sit this paper today." Kasha's head snapped toward me. She planted it. The accusation came fast, desperate, familiar. She touched me at the door. "She has hated me for years. She has been acting strange all morning. Ask anyone." She changed seats. She accused me before anything happened. She planned this. The room turned again because people love a reversal even when a life is hanging from it. I felt the old terror rise, but it hit the surface of my calm and broke there. This was why I had chosen D01. This was why I had logged the seat change, emptied my pockets, kept both hands visible, asked for camera review before the papers opened. Evidence is not dramatic. Evidence is boring until it saves you. Mr. Halden checked the log. Candidate D01 had her pockets displayed empty at 8:26 before candidate F07 approached the aisle. The assistant proctor nodded. "I witnessed it. Camera 1 shows candidate D01 did not leave her desk after seating." Ms. Wren looked at the monitor again, and candidate F07 entered the hall wearing the bracelet. Kasha swallowed. "It is not a cheat device. It is just paper. Someone put it there before I arrived." Ms. Run held up the strip with tweezers. Your candidate number is printed along the margin. Kasha's hand flew to her mouth. She had made the same mistake all careful criminals make when they believe they are smarter than the system. She personalized the weapon so nobody else could use it, then forgot that possession would become ownership. But the strip was not the deepest trap. In my first life, the formula paper found in my sleeve had carried my candidate number 2. I spent months wondering why, until I remembered Kasha borrowing my admission slip that morning to check seating. She had copied the number. She had planned to make the planted note look mine beyond doubt. This time, because I never let her touch my slip, because I kept it in the plastic sleeve under the camera, because I took the door seat before she could close around me, she had used her own backup strip. Improvisation had exposed her. This is a mistake, she said, weaker now. I was going to report it. I found it near my desk. Inside a sealed bracelet? Ms. Wren asked. Kasha did not answer. The exam still had to happen. That was the cruelty and beauty of institutions. They can ruin someone in one corner while continuing to distribute paper in the rest of the room. Kasha was led through the door by Ms. Run and another invigilator, not in cuffs, not loudly, but with the quiet finality of a curtain falling. The class watched her go, and I watched the door close behind her without feeling the triumph I expected. Relief, yes. A savage little satisfaction, yes. But also something heavier. In my first life, I had imagined that if people ever saw Kasha for what she was, the world would apologize to me. The lights would warm. The shame would lift. Teachers would beg forgiveness. Students would say they should have known. Instead, the hall mostly looked frightened. Frightened not because they had wronged me, but because the best among them had been caught, which meant excellence was no longer a shield. Mina stared at her desk, white-lipped. Sorrel wiped her eyes, though I doubted she was crying for me. Mr. Halden rang the second bell 20 minutes late. You will begin now. Additional time will be granted at the end. No candidate is to discuss the incident. Papers moved down the rows. When my booklet landed on D01, I touched the cover lightly before opening it. It was real. Not a planted strip. Not a disciplinary notice. Not the appeal I had written until my fingers cramped in another timeline. A real exam paper with my candidate number beside it and a camera above me recording nothing worse than my breathing. For the first 10 minutes, I could not read. The words blurred into gray insects. My body kept waiting for someone to grab my wrist, shake my sleeve, shout my guilt. Then the question on the first page steadied. Constitutional remedies, proportionality, administrative discretion. I almost laughed. The law, asking whether power could be limited when used unfairly. I picked up my pen and wrote like a girl crawling out of a locked room. I would love to say I focused completely after that, but rebirth does not turn trauma into discipline on command. Every scrape of a chair made my fingers tighten. Every time an invigilator walked past, my heart tried to hide behind my ribs. When a student behind me coughed, I nearly raised my hand. But D01 changed the physics of fear. Nobody could whisper over my shoulder without the proctor seeing. Nobody could slide paper onto my desk without crossing the camera line. Nobody could box me in because the door was to my right, the aisle was open, and my own choices had made witnesses of people who once became excuses. Halfway through the paper, Ms. Wren returned alone and spoke quietly to Mr. Halden. He nodded. The monitor showed the hallway for a second as she opened the door. Kasha sitting on a bench outside the integrity office, her mother standing over her with a phone in one hand and rage carved into her face. Mrs. Venn was not looking at her daughter like a worried parent. She was looking at her like an investment that had malfunctioned. The door closed before I could see more. I forced myself back to the page. Pattern disruption was not just for stories, it was survival. Question, answer. Breath, pen stroke. Memory, evidence. I wrote until my hand cramped, then switched pens. I wrote through the extra 20 minutes, through the final bell, through the strange floating silence after every high-stakes exam when hundreds of people realized the world did not end, but something has still been decided. When Mr. Halden collected my booklet, he paused. Candidate D01, he said softly. Wait after dismissal. The old fear returned so fast, I nearly stood. Wait after dismissal had once meant search, accusation, ruin. But his face held no suspicion. For your seating change record, he added. You will need a copy. I nodded because my voice had gone missing. Outside the hall, the corridor was chaos, wearing whispers. Students clustered under notice boards, pretending not to talk about Kasia, while saying her name every third sentence. Maybe it was planted. Her mother will fix it. They cannot expel the top student before rankings. What if all her study materials were compromised? What if she helped people? That last question spread fastest, because guilt loves company. I saw Mina and Sorel near the drinking fountain, heads together, faces drained. In my first life, they had testified that I seemed nervous and secretive, that Kasia had tried to calm me, that they were shocked by the note in my sleeve. Their statements were polished enough to have been written before the exam. This time when Mina saw me, she flinched. Sorel gripped her arm. They did not approach.
Good.
I had survived Kasia, but I had not forgotten the hands that helped build the cage. Mr. Halden gave me a printed seating change receipt, an incident-adjacent witness note, and a sealed copy of the camera timestamp request.
Keep these, he said.
There may be follow-up. Against me? I asked before I could stop myself. His expression softened by one painful degree.
No.
Not based on what we have. Not based on what we have. The phrase sounded small, but to me it was a door opening. In my first life, adults had said based on what we have while looking at the planted strip and closing every path. Now what they had was different because I had made it different. I tucked the papers into my folder, not trusting my hands to stop shaking. Then Kasia's mother came down the corridor like a storm in pearl earrings. Mrs. Venn had the same delicate face as her daughter, but none of the softness. Her heels struck the floor hard enough to make people move without being asked. You, she said, stopping in front of me. The corridor quieted with the speed of cowards finding entertainment. What did you do to my daughter? In my first life, I had met Mrs. Venn only once, during the hearing, when she sat behind Kasia and watched me cry with an expression of polite disgust. Now she stood close enough for me to smell mint gum and expensive anger. I held my folder against my chest. I sat by the door. Do not be clever. That is all I did. Her eyes dropped to the sealed records in my folder. She understood paperwork better than Kasia did. Her mouth tightened. This family has protected students in this academy for years. Maybe that is the problem, I said. The whispers around us sharpened. Mrs. Venn leaned in. Careful, Miss Vale. I should have been scared. I was scared. But there is a point where fear becomes boring because it has already taken everything once and has no imagination left. I am being careful, I said. That is why I asked for cameras. The formal notice came the next morning, pinned to the academy portal before breakfast and printed on the main board by noon. Candidate F07 suspended pending full integrity review. Associated welfare martial privileges revoked. All candidates reminded that seating interference, possession of unauthorized materials, intimidation, and obstruction of candidate movement constitute major violations. It did not name Kasia in the header, but everyone knew. By evening, everyone knew more. Someone leaked that her bracelet strip matched a file found on her laptop. Someone else said the file contained multiple candidate numbers, including mine, crossed out beside backup versions. Mina withdrew from the rankings before dinner. Sorel's parents collected her at midnight. Kasia's mother resigned from the welfare committee for personal reasons, which was the language adults use when consequences arrive, wearing gloves. But the real blow landed on Friday in the auditorium, where the academy assembled all senior candidates under the excuse of reviewing exam conduct. I sat near the left aisle this time, not by the door, because I no longer needed to prove anything to the room. Kasia entered late with two administrators, her hair tied back, her face bare, no gold pins, no pearl clips, no glow of inevitability. She did not look at me. Principal Arden stood at the podium and read from a prepared statement. Following review of examination hall footage, confiscated material, device records, and witness interviews, The Integrity Board has found candidate Kasia Ven responsible for possession of unauthorized examination materials, attempted interference with another candidate's seating, misuse of welfare marshal access, and obstruction of examination procedure. Effective immediately, her examination entry is voided, her academy candidacy is terminated, and she is expelled from St. Auresin Academy. The auditorium made no sound at first. Expelled is a word students think belongs to troublemakers, not scholarship winners with perfect handwriting. Then Kasia's knees bent slightly, not enough to fall, enough to show the body knew what pride refused. Principal Arden continued, voice flatter now. The board has also referred evidence to the External Examination Authority. Any student found to have assisted or benefited from these actions will face separate review. That was when half the auditorium stopped breathing. Kasia finally looked at me. There was hatred there, yes, but beneath it something almost like confusion, as if she still could not understand how a girl she had placed in a corner had learned to move. After the assembly, I expected the apologies to come. They did, but not like justice. Justice in stories arrives clean, with bowed heads and perfect confessions. In real life, apologies come wrapped in self-preservation. Mina sent a message saying she had always felt uncomfortable with Kasia's behavior but had been too intimidated to speak. Sorel wrote that she hoped I understood she was also a victim. 3 classmates who had laughed during my first life search now stopped me by the lockers to say the whole thing had been so scary and they were glad I was okay, though none of them could explain why they had believed Kasia so easily even before she accused me of anything. Teachers offered careful sympathy without naming the institution that had given a student martial enough freedom to arrange cages. I accepted none of it fully and rejected none of it dramatically. I had learned that closure is not a door slamming. Sometimes it is a desk by a door, a camera receipt in your folder, a rule read before someone can twist it, a hand that no longer trembles when the golden girl starts crying. My exam result arrived 2 weeks later. I did not top the academy. That surprised people more than it surprised me. Kasia had taught them to think stories only mattered if they ended with crowns. I ranked 7th, high enough for the national interview, high enough for the scholarship shortlist, high enough to prove that the future stolen from me had not depended on perfection. The girl who placed first was quiet, kind, and so shocked by her own result that she cried into her sleeve. I liked her immediately. When reporters came sniffing after rumors of Kasia's expulsion, Principal Arden tried to keep my name out of it. For once, I agreed. I did not want to become the Academy's inspirational survivor poster, the brave girl under the camera, the candidate who exposed corruption by sitting near a door. I wanted something smaller and more radical. I wanted to study without being useful to people who hated me. I wanted to walk into rooms without checking corners for traps. I wanted to choose seats for comfort one day, not survival. The interview for the national scholarship took place in a glass building downtown, where the chairs were arranged in a half circle and nobody tried to tell me where to sit. One panelist, an older woman with silver hair and a voice like a closed book, asked why I had requested a door access seat on the day of the examination. The official file had reached them, then. Of course it had. I could have given a polished answer about anxiety management, procedural transparency, and candidate safety. Instead, I told the truth carefully enough to survive being heard. Because in my previous experience at school, I said, students with social authority could control space before adults noticed. I wanted my movement, materials, and conduct to be visible from the beginning. The panelists leaned back. That is a very legal answer. It is a very practical answer, I said. Another panelist smiled. And if you had not been allowed to move? I would have refused to sit until the refusal was logged. The old me would have thought that sounded impossible. The old me believed obedience was the safest shape a girl could take. But obedience had placed me in the corner. Compliance had made me easy to frame. Niceness had taught predators that I could be arranged. The panel asked about administrative law, ethics, evidence, and why I wanted the scholarship. I did not say revenge. Revenge is a spark. It can get you through the first locked door, but it cannot build a life. I said I wanted to understand systems because systems are where cruelty hides when it learns to wear a badge. I said I wanted to study how rules protect people only when people know how to invoke them. I said I had once believed fairness was a feeling adults carried naturally, and now I knew fairness was a structure that needed witnesses, records, access, and consequences. When I left, the silver-haired panelist walked me to the door. "Miss Vale," she said, "do you always sit near exits?" I looked down the bright hallway, at the elevator, at the staircase, at the open glass doors leading to a street full of rain and buses and ordinary danger.
"Not always," I said.
"But I like knowing where they are." Kasia disappeared from the academy whirled the way a bright stain fades after too much scrubbing, never fully, never openly. Her family appealed the expulsion, then withdrew when the external authority confirmed a lifetime ban from national examinations administered under their charter. That was not the same as a lifetime ban from everything, no matter what gossip said. She could study elsewhere someday under different systems with different doors.
Part of me hated that.
Part of me, the part still 17 and shaking under fluorescent lights, wanted the universe to carve failure into her name as deeply as it had once carved shame into mine. But another part of me understood that the most important punishment had already happened. Kasia Venn had been seen. Not suspected, not whispered about, not privately excused.
Seen.
Her hands, her bracelet, her attempt to rebuild the box around me, her mother's influence failing at the door. For a girl who lived by controlling the angle, exposure was exile. On my last day at St. Orizon, I walked through examination hall 3 alone. The cleaners had stripped the number cards from the desks. Sunlight fell across the floor in long rectangles. D01 sat by the door, ordinary again, no halo, no warning, just a gray desk with a scratched corner and one wobbling leg. I rested my hand on it for a moment, then laughed under my breath because I had spent so long turning furniture into fate. A desk had not saved me.
A door had not saved me.
A camera had not saved me. I saved myself by refusing to be placed where someone else needed me to be. Before I left, I moved D01 half an inch back into line with the others. It scraped loudly across the floor, an ugly, honest sound. Then I walked out without looking over my shoulder. Years later, when people asked why I became so particular about exits, records, and seating charts, I never told them the whole story. I told them procedure matters. I told them visibility protects the vulnerable. I told them informal power is still power, especially when everyone pretends it is kindness. Those answers were true, but incomplete. The deeper truth was this. In one life, a girl boxed me in, and the world believed the shape she made around me was proof of my guilt. In the next, I took the seat by the door and let her show everyone the cage she had been carrying in her hands. That was the revenge. Not her expulsion, not the ruined bracelet, not the auditorium announcement, not her mother's face when the cameras mattered more than influence. The revenge was the moment Kasia realized I did not have to defeat her by becoming louder, crueler, or more perfect. I only had to move. One desk, one door, one rule invoked before the bell, one refusal to let a smiling girl decide the walls of my life. And when I think of that morning now, I do not remember the cold handle first. I remember the warmth of my own palm closing around it, turning it, opening the door myself.